Nasrudin on his own. The king, the king had allowed a pet elephant loose near Rasrudin's village, and it was destroying the crops. People decided to go in a body to Tamerlane to protest. Nasrudin, because he had been known to amuse the king at times, was appointed leader of the delegation. So overawed were they by the magnificence of the court that the group pushed Nasrudin into the audience chamber and fled. "Yes," said the king, "what do you want, Nasrudin?" About your elephant, your majesty," stammered the mullah. He saw that the king was in a bad temper that morning. "Yes, what about my elephant?" That is, I was thinking that it needed a mate." That's it? It needs a mate. Is that the end of story? That's the end of story, dear. That's his solution. Limits of perception. Carrying some cocks to a certain place, Nasrudin thought he would let them out for a little, allowing them to walk part of the way. They started to wander in all directions, pecking at the earth. "Oh, fools," shouted Nasrudin, "you know when it is going to be sunrise. How is it that you can't even understand where I am going?" They know sunrise, but they don't know anything else, seems like. Which way round? A man who had studied at many metaphysical schools came to Nasrudin in order to show that he could be accepted for discipleship. He described in detail where he had been and what he had studied. "I hope that you'll accept me, or at least tell me your ideas," he said, "because I have spent so much of my time in studying at these schools." "Alas," said Nasrudin, "you have studied the teachers and their teachings. What shall have happened if the teachers and the teachings should have studied you? Then we would have had something worthwhile." Weird. The milkman's horse. Nestor decided to sell firewood and bought a milkman's horse cheaply to help him in his rounds. So he started to sell firewood. The horse knew his old round and stopped after every few houses and neighed loudly. People came out with milk cans and reviled the mullah when they found that he was only carrying firewood. Finally, Rasrudin could stand it no longer, and he shook his fist at the horse, saying, "Let us get this settled once and for all. Who is selling, you or me? You neigh to announce the firewood, and they attack me for not bringing the milk." Weird. That's pretty weird. What is it all for? Yes, I suppose that says something about life, that people mismatch their...
And the horses really, when they are for many years doing something, they know what they're doing, you know. And
The horse.
they like to do that.
The horse will, of course, do the same thing.
Yeah, we had a movie in comedy. It was what
The horse.
Andy Griffith. The milkman used to have the horse. He used to go out with the horse around the village.
I'm sure the horse knows the way.
And then the time came, he bought a car, so he was delivering the milk with a car.
Yeah.
And the horse got into depression, just couldn't take it. He just got used to, and he wanted to do it again.
The horse?
And then somebody had the idea, actually what happened, one day he followed the car and he was uh, going behind the car. And then they understood that the horse wanted to just go on his tours again. So he tied the horse on the back of the car and he was just going slow.
That's it?
Mm-hmm.
What is it all for? Nasrudin lay under a mulberry tree one
And
hot.
the horse got off his depression and started to eat again.
He wasn't depressed. Nasrudin lay under a mulberry tree one hot summer's day, looking at some enormous watermelons which grew nearby. His mind turned to higher things. How is it, he wondered, that an immense, impressive tree like this mulberry brings forth such puny little fruits? Look at the miserable weakling creeper which produces such huge and delicious melons. That's a good question. As he was pondering the paradox, a mulberry fell and landed on his shaven head. I see, said Newsom, that is the reason.
The watermelon was falling.
Is it? I should have thought of that before.
You see, there's a reason for everything.
What was the reason?
So they don't fall. If the watermelon would fall from up there, it would be dangerous. So nature doesn't want to be dangerous.
Is that the reason? Oh, God.
Somehow they cannot even carry the weight, from up there. Imagine what type of
I see the
carry so
reason.
much weight.
Okay. So he figured that out, I guess.
That's not a good idea somehow altogether.
But that's a good question.
Yeah.
Pyramid expert, Nasrudin. Nasrudin was sitting among the branches of a tree, sniffing the blossoms and sunning himself. A traveler asked him what he was doing there, climbing the Great Pyramid. He says, what are you climbing the Great Pyramid? You are nowhere near a pyramid. And there are 4 ways up a pyramid, one by each face. That is a tree. Yes, said Mulla, but it's much more fun like this, don't you think? Birds, blossoms, zephyr, sunshine. I hardly think I could have done better. I guess that's a real story, huh? I don't know how these stories could come about. Where I sit. At a gathering of divines, Nasrudin was seated right at the end of the room, farthest from the place of honor. Presently he began to tell jokes, and soon people were crowded around him, laughing and listening. Nobody was taking any notice of the graybeard who was giving a learned discourse. When he could no longer hear himself speak, the president of the assembly roared out, "You must be silent. Nobody may talk unless he sits where the chief sits." I don't know how you see it, said Nasrudin, but it strikes me that where I sit is where the chief sits. Yeah? Goodness. Anyone can do it that way. An opinionated, small-minded cleric was lecturing the people in the treehouse where Nasrudin spent so much of his time. As the hours went by, Nasrudin realized how this man's thoughts were running in patterns, how he was a victim of vanity and pride, and how minor points of unrealistic intellectualism for its own sake were magnified by him and applied to every situation. Subject after subject was discussed, and every time the intellectual cited books and precedents, false analogies, and extraordinary presumptions without intuitive reality. At length he produced a book which he had written, and Nasrudin stretched his hand forth to see it, because he was the only literate man present. Holding it in front of his eyes, Nasrudin turned page after page. while the assembly looked on. After several minutes, the itinerant cleric began to fidget. Then he could not contain himself any longer. "You are holding my book upside down," he said. He screamed. "Oh, God! I know," said Nestor, "and since it is one of the archetypes which seem to have produced you, it seems to be the only sensible thing to do if one is to learn from it."
What do you mean by that?
Huh?
What did he mean by that? What was his answer again, really?
He says, "I know," said Nestor, "and since it is one of the archetypes which seem to have produced you, it seems to be the only sensible thing to do if one is to learn from it." The guy was rigid, and the guy was an intellectual that didn't have any intuition. I don't know.
It seems like today's intellectuals, they over talk about something that...
Yeah. Life and death. Life and death. Nasrudin climbed a tree to saw through a branch. A passerby who saw what he was doing cried, "Look out, you are on the wrong side of the branch. You will fall with it." "Am I a fool that I should believe you, or are you a seer that you can tell me the future?" demanded the mullah. Soon afterwards, however, the branch gave way and he fell to the ground. Nasrudin ran to catch up with the other man. "Your prediction has been fulfilled. Tell me how. Tell me now, how shall I die?" However much he tried, the other man could not now convince Nasrudin that he was not a seer. Ultimately, he lost his temper and said, "You might as well die now." As soon as he heard these words, the mullah fell down and lay still. Neighbors came and found him and put him in a coffin. As they were walking towards the cemetery, there was a dispute as to the shortest route. Nasrudin lost his patience. Raising his head from the coffin, he said, "When I am alive, I used to turn left here. That is the quickest way." I think we're going to stop with our readings of the incredible Nasrudin. That's incredible.